I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and would crave your indulgence on just two issues before I get into my support for this bill which is before your Parliament today. First, of course, to join with the Honourable Member for St. Peter who has introduced this bill in giving deep sympathy not only to this country and this region, of course, to the family of the late Prime Minister, Owen Seymour Arthur, one of the most outstanding Barbadians ever lived. His contribution to this country and region is unquestionable. I mean, the man for the times, as has been said, he led Barbados for almost 14 years at one of our greatest times of economic prosperity, reducing the unemployment of this country to 6.7%. As I've said many times before in this Parliament, the lowest it has been since the abolition of slavery. His being the political leader, Prime Minister of the Caribbean, at the forefront of the Caribbean single market and economy, and of course Barbados at the time being the leader in terms of the establishment of the Caribbean Court of Justice, and the mere force with which he fought the superpowers, regardless of the size of Barbados, his stand on the Ship Rider Agreement, for instance. But I know, of course, that this Parliament will shortly have, I'm sure, the opportunity to pay tribute in wider form to the late Prime Minister of Barbados, who, of course, was a member of this Parliament for over 3 decades. Secondly, sir, of course, this is the first speech I'll be making as a government backbencher, so therefore I have now served in every capacity as a parliamentarian, sir, starting as an opposition member of Parliament, a government cabinet minister, and now a government backbencher. So in terms of Parliament, sir, I have to be now seen as an elder statesman, sir. And certainly I would hope that my speeches are colored in that vein. But sir, I really want to take the opportunity here now. And you know how it is, sir. The press calls you and you avoid them at stages like this. But I want to take the opportunity to thank the Honourable Prime Minister of Barbados for giving me the honour and privilege for 26 months to serve in the Cabinet of Barbados. Sir, look, there have not been 150 people who have served as cabinet ministers in this country since the establishment of cabinet government. So as we know, in the mid-1950s, 66 years ago. So you're in still an exclusive group to have served or to serve as a cabinet minister, sir. No more than 150 persons. And therefore it's an honor and privilege, sir, which I will obviously carry to my grave, sir. There's no right to be a cabinet minister, and a prime minister, of course, who wins all 30 seats has a difficult task. And as I said, I was privileged to have served for 26 months, and I will continue, of course, to support this Barbados Labour Party. I will obviously still have a say in the bills and the legislation that comes before this Parliament as a member of the parliamentary group. This act, sir, as I believe the Honourable Member of St. Peter said, mentioned, has genesis for a long time, so it might even have been, certainly it was conceptualized in the previous Barbados Labour Party government led by the now late Prime Minister Owen Arthur. In 2014, 2015, so I remember attending, I think it was two sessions, either 2 or 3, which the then government had organized And I would have attended, of course, as, I think, recognized leader for stakeholders within the organization serving people with disabilities. I was invited in that capacity, and as I suppose as an attorney at law who would have done a lot of work in terms of disability rights. And the last government, in fact, had a couple bills in drafts. One was on discrimination of employment, which were discussed at those sessions. This bill, which is before your Parliament today, sir, is an expansion of certainly the prevention of discrimination in employment bill, which the last government was thinking of, and I believe it, in fact, combines two bills which were before them. And of course, like most things, the last government sat and did nothing. As I said, sir, this was 2014, 2015, and of course, they had three and a half years before election to bring in this legislation or similar legislation, and they didn't. But that's typical of the last government, sir. The definition, and so of course, I'm going to concentrate on discrimination or prevention of discrimination against persons with disabilities, sir. I mean, one of my core policy areas. I'm now, of course, freer to speak so on policy now, not being a member of cabinet, and I will, as I so do, I think, hope at least give some enlightenment on certain areas. And the definition of disabilities in this bill, in section 2, is in fact the same definition as it is in the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, a United Nations convention which the government of Barbados, under the last Barbados Labour Party government, would have signed in June 2007. And then the last government of Barbados, Democratic Labour Party, would have ratified just after the 2013 election on the 27th of February 2013, sir. But after a country signs and ratifies a convention, it really ought to bring the convention or certainly the tenets of the convention before Parliament so it could become law. So I'm fully aware of the institutional systems which would have to be put in place to give people with disabilities the genuine facility of being able to take advantage of the tenets and provisions which are in the convention of which I speak, sir. And therefore, because of those fundamentals, I suppose, that we haven't been able to institute, sir, and when I say we here, sir, I'm speaking of this government, because we came in a tremendous economic downturn, sir, and then when you're recovering and starting to see the light, on comes COVID the last 6 months, and you're fighting then against that, sir. But really and truly, the government owes, and I want to say this, people with disabilities the opportunity to be subjects, to be parties to further legislation, disabilities legislation, enshrining their rights in conformity with the convention that we signed, both parties, separate times as a government. On the issue of employment, we are here debating effectively the provisions of the convention in Article 27 relating to work and employment, and therefore I commend the Honourable Minister of Labour for bringing this bill, introducing this bill to Parliament, for the work that has been put into the bill in his ministry over the last 2 years. He therefore, the Honourable Member, is in fact legislating that aspect of the convention into Barbados law, section 27, and essentially all of the provisions, in Article 27 of the convention are being provided for in this bill. The convention, in fact, defines what is discrimination on the basis of disability, effectively speaking to the distinction, exclusion, or restriction on the basis of disability, such that a person is impaired on an equal basis with others, and that theme is repeated in this bill, sir, is impaired as to their human rights and fundamental freedoms in all aspects of their lives, sir, whether political, cultural, social, etc. And so, look, I mean, in a couple, I think a recent speech I made in this Parliament, I spoke about my background as a little boy in England, sir, to try to bring some understanding of where I come from. Because a lot of people seeing me might have thought that I had life easy, sir. And that's why I'm fundamentally against discrimination at all levels, sir. Fundamentally. And in this world, we know, including in this Barbados, people have been discriminated against because the quote-unquote too black, or to go have quote-unquote naughty hair, or to quote-unquote have 4 eyes, little children at school wearing glasses, and you're discriminated against and bullied because you're wearing glasses, or you're quote-unquote you're too short, or quote-unquote, as I know full well, because you might have a speech and list. I mean, I've stood in this Parliament equal with others as an opposition MP to be told and to be mocked at by at least 2 then government cabinet ministers. Yes, that is the truth, sir. One was the then member for St. Michael South Central, de facto deputy prime minister of this country, and quite frankly, when he did that day, I was astonished because I was absolutely shocked. I didn't think that he would do that, he of all of them. And I remember telling someone about that recently, and they said they didn't believe it. And they went and asked another former DLP cabinet minister from that cabinet, who confirmed that what I said was true. And in fact, that cabinet minister, to his credit, then cabinet minister, said that he was disgraced. He really wondered what that member was about. And thank God he was beaten badly last election, because, I mean, that kind of attitude, if members of parliament, cabinet ministers, could discriminate on the basis of simple fundamentals that, quite frankly, are absolutely irrelevant, and does not stop someone for trying to achieve the best of their talents, do good in society, serve their people to the best of their ability, sir. Those kind of people have no place as representatives at any level with anyone, sir. And Section 3.2 sets out all the grounds for discrimination in this act, grounds for discrimination. But I'm going to concentrate, as I said, sir, on disabilities. And as it relates especially to discrimination in employment for people with disabilities. So we know that a large percentage of people with disabilities, substantial percentage, are unemployed. This government has tried to focus on their self-employment, sir, through, and have given the opportunity, for example, through the Trust Loans Fund, which of course was established under the ministerial mandate of the Honourable Member for St. George South. Also, this party, sir, would have adopted a policy that 2% of government contracts should go to persons within communities and people with disabilities. But, you know, sir, you set policies of the government, but then you have to make sure that they're implemented, sir. And I'm not so sure that we have so far laid the platform where people with disabilities have been able to avail themselves, sir, of the very wise policy of this government to bring them into the mainstream in terms of award of government contracts. I believe more has to be done, sir. And I can say, sir, that, look, we were about to look at that, sir, because we had discussed that in March and COVID came along, and I know that has been set back, but I'm asking for it to be put back on the table, because persons with disabilities are not naturally able to go and tender for these contracts. They need assistance in terms of the profile and the marketing and the financials and other aspects, and I think we have a duty to do that, because we cannot afford to leave anyone behind in this society. And as Mahatma Gandhi said, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And on the political front, sir, this political party, which the Barbados Labour Party, won, 74% of the vote, those voting, sir. I can tell as a fact, sir, I know, sir, that well over 80% of persons with disabilities who voted last election voted for this party, sir. I made sure of that, and I say no more on that point. And we have a duty to a community which heavily supported us, to ensure that they can get the benefit of these issues, of the policies that we have started to put in place for their advancement. But opportunity, sir, is what you need in life. And opportunity starts too with education. And the Honourable Minister of Education, the Member of Parliament for St. Michael's South East, for example, last year introduced a resolution into this Parliament buttressing Ann Hill School. Sir, remember, monies were given to improve it, Ann Hill School, just outside the Pine, sir, or in the Pine itself, sir. And I should also say that, sir, that when we talk about discrimination, foolish discrimination, sir, I should have mentioned too, because we know, sir, we're representatives, whereby people are discriminated against because of the district where they live or where they're born, foolishly, that kind of thing. I went to school, sir, in the Pine. My sister went to school there too, at the Irving Wilson School. So we were at school in the same compound, and this bill is about seeking to remove those nonsensical types of discrimination, sir, which still prevail among certain sectors in this country. And the Ann Hill School and the Irving Wilson School are still the only two, to my knowledge, sir, government special needs schools serving students who are between 11 and 18 years old, and we need to buttress that and improve that, sir. Because outside of those two facilities for children between those ages, parents have to still pay for their special needs education of their children. No, I know, yes, government subsidizes the education financially in a lot of cases, but it should be as of right, sir. And it is something that we have to, as a government and as a country, look at, because these kind of issues define ultimately what is the good society. And I mean, outside of that, for neurotypical children, they have a wide choice of at least 23 secondary schools, all of which are free. neurotypical children, who have some form of difference. They can go to the secondary schools, and that is free. So we have certainly made progress in that. But the education of the child who is differently able is paramount, because if that doesn't happen, they're not going to have as much opportunity in employment, which this bill is seeking to give them, sir. And we all know someone might have immobility issues, but that doesn't mean that the brain is in any way affected. So in fact, the brain is better off than a lot of others in society who compensate and play powerful and arrogant. That's the reality, and they have to be given the opportunity. Employers shall not discriminate in arising from this bill against an employee in terms of or conditions of employment that the employer affords the employee. And that is extremely important, sir. And shall not discriminate against a person in the creation of the jobs. Section 4. So, and flexibility has to be given, as the Honourable Member for St. Peter said, in terms of the accommodating the employee. I mean, an employee may have a child who has disabilities, and therefore, under this bill, provision ought to be made to accommodate such person who may have to take their child once a week, once every 2 weeks for special treatment, sir. And you have flexibility. And especially now, sir, since we have embarked on flexible work conditions, employment conditions with COVID over the last 4 months or so, sir, I would hope that employers understand the need to be more flexible in this regard. As the Honourable Member said, this bill would be enforced by the Employment Rights Tribunal, sir. And I would want to say, sir, that at least advise the Honourable Minister that he may have to look, I'm sure, at whether the Employment Rights Tribunal will become overburdened. Because the Employment Rights Tribunal, of course, as we know already, supervises the Employment Rights Act. At the time when the Barbados Labour Party came into office 26 months ago, I am aware that they had about 270 odd cases that were outstanding before that tribunal under the Employment Rights Act. There was a hiatus before we got the tribunals in place. 3 separate tribunals. We know a 9-member commission divided into 3 tribunals, 3 persons each. And we know they've been doing well. Perhaps the Honourable Minister may wish to, in his wrap-up, give the figures as to how many outstanding cases they have now, how many they have already heard under his ministerial leadership, sir. I don't know those figures, sir. But I suspect that when this act really gets going, that there may be issues of, again, before the tribunal, combining, sir. I certainly, as I seek to reestablish my law practice, sir, I certainly look forward to being before the tribunal on that, on that issue. I would have done, of course, the first case before the Barbados Court of Appeal on the Employment Rights Tribunal, and won it, sir. Was not able to go before the Caribbean Court because at that time I was a minister, sir. So I look forward to practicing some law under this. It is right for exploration, sir, and therefore I think, Minister, you might have to look at the how the Employment Rights Tribunal may be able in the future to cope with this now new responsibility. Certainly, sir, the idea of the three months, there's a time frame of 3 months in which you have to make a written complaint to the tribunal if you feel that you're being discriminated against in the workplace. And 3 months, as we know, sir, is not a long time. It is short. I mean, as you're fully aware, sir, in normal civil practice, you have a lot longer time, 3 years, 4 years, sometimes longer, 6 to bring a civil procedure action. So 3 months is short. But thankfully, under Section 29 of this Act, the tribunal can extend the time in which a written complaint has to be given, depending on the circumstances involved. And that is good to have that flexibility. You have, of course, it's administered through the Chief Labor Officer, and sometimes you wonder if the Chief Labor Officer has too many responsibilities already. I suppose it depends on the good sense of the Chief Labor Officer in terms of delegating responsibility to his officers on this so that he personally isn't swamped. And what, of course, is interesting as well is that the Act, at least in my submissions, also applies to government, because unlike the Employment Rights Tribunal, which at Section 51 specifically says that the Employment Rights Act, does not bind the Crown, but applies to statutory corporations, this Act does not say that it does not bind the Crown. So therefore, the implication is that this Act also applies to government departments. The Severance Payments Act, sir, as you fully aware, in fact exempts the public officers from persons in statutory boards under the Pensions Act from being able to avail themselves of this Act, of that Act. But this Act, the Cabinet was, in its good sense, did not say that it does not bind the Crown. So therefore, it binds the public sector as well. And therefore, so the natural consequence of that too is that persons who are responsible for appointing people and selecting people for jobs, both in the government and private sector, have to become fully aware of their obligations and duties under this Act, sir. And I trust that there will be information channels to educate the public, Government Information Service and others, as to what are people's rights and obligations under this Act. And in fact, in terms of employment in the private sector, sir, certainly I've said this many times before as an opposition MP, and both in and outside, well, before being parliamentarian, sir, in my life as a leader in the rights of promoting rights of people with disabilities, there's a crying need for affirmative action in the private sector, in both private and government, sir. In the private sector, you can give incentives to employ persons with disabilities. Sir, I say that in Jamaica, there's a policy that 3% of public sector jobs are reserved for people with disabilities. We don't have that policy, a similar policy in Barbados, and I believe the time is right whereby we move to that kind of framework, especially if we are to make legislation like this meaningful for people with disabilities. So last week I spoke, and I believe I spoke with passion on the issue, another issue, sir, because what? Half of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition speech was on the domestic partnerships issue, sir. And I'm freer to speak on this now, sir, than I was a week ago. What I said certainly does not bind Cabinet, sir. And I said, sir, that because of my background, I have to be fundamentally against discrimination, sir, in all forms. Because of my Christian background, sir, having been, yes, brought up in an Anglican church, sir, and baptized in an Anglican church, I must say, and I mean, I could not be truthful. My mother would want to disown me if I said otherwise, sir. That is the truth. So I can't, sir. I will never accept that marriage could be anything other than between a man and a woman. All right? So I start by saying that marriage must be between a man and woman, sir. That is the truth. I couldn't come beyond that in terms of marriage, sir. But in terms of discrimination, sir, and really and truly, you know, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition has to sometimes think past. I want to be fair, sir, and don't sound like if I'm being offensive, sir. The narrow concepts of religious tenets and tradition and what we derived from the Church of England, sir. A Church of England that, as I said before, during the debate on Black Lives Matter, sir, was highly discriminatory, that had black people sitting in the back of the church, sir. They couldn't go to the front whatsoever. That was discriminatory, whatever you say in terms of education, in terms of where people lived on the church land, sir, you know, the backwaters. And sir, I mean, because as we know, the church was part of the state of Barbados until it was disestablished in 1968. And we have to, in the year 2020, the third decade of the 20th century, accept that there are people among us. All of us have constituents, sir. All right? That you go when election times come and ask for a vote. That have sexual preferences that may not be similar to yours as a candidate, but you want the vote still, right? But yet, you want to come as the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and discriminate against them in the highest legislative forum in the country, sir. I can't stand for that, sir. That you're going to say that somebody should be denied a job because of their sexual preference. But that is effectively what we're saying, and I can't accept that, sir. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition spoke in terms that he doesn't know of those situations in Barbados, but sir, but I don't know if the case is finished, sir. I mean, I was out of law. I'm going to get back into it now. But before the Employment Rights Tribunal, last year, sir, a case was filed because somebody was dismissed from a particular place of employment because they revealed themselves as being of a certain sexual identity. So I don't know where the Honourable Leader of the Opposition lives, sir. But this bill is seeking to prevent that. And I have to stand firmly on the side of the bill because, you know, none of us can stand here, as I said last week during the Remote Works bill, and play God. I am not casting judgment on anybody, sir, on their behavior. I can't. Because on Judgment Day, the Lord will make a judgment on me too. None of us are perfect. All of us have defects in our beings. Sir, he who is without sin cast the first stone, sir. And I am not going to say that someone in St. James North must be denied a job because of a sexual preference, sir. Not in 2020. I thank you, sir. That is no different, sir. And you have all of, as I said in section 3.2, sets it out. That is no different, sir, from when I was minister in charge of the police force. It came to my attention that under the previous administration, someone was denied promotion in the police force because they happened to be they happened to be cousin of a then candidate of the BLP, who is now a minister in this government. That's why they were denied promotion at one of the highest levels of the police force. And when I heard that, I was appalled. I was appalled that a police service commission could take that stand. And sir, it has to be highly condemned on any of these grounds. All of these grounds, sir, are, in my opinion, pertinent and relevant to where we are at right now as a country. So, sir, I stand in support of this bill, sir, as now elder statesman, one of the elder statesmen of this Parliament. I end by where I started too, sir, because one thing I forgot to say when I pay tribute, and of course, like I said, I will have, I'm sure, opportunity in the near future to pay tribute in wider fashion to the late Prime Minister. I'm also proud, sir, to be standing here as Member of Parliament for St. James North, for which I will continue to be, sir, as long as the people of St. James North and the Lord wish me to be, sir. I am proud to be representative for some of the areas that the late Prime Minister would have represented at the start of his parliamentary career, sir, namely Aston Hall, the Wim, Roadview, Bakers, sir, and part of Black Bess, sir, the Black Bess Pet Plantation, and the honourable member for St. Peter is laughing, and he knows why, sir. We had a conversation today. But I'm proud, sir, to be able to say that I represent, because in fact, 23% of my constituents live in St. Peter, in the parish of St. Peter, sir. And therefore I'm proud to have that as part of my service to this country. I thank you, sir.